When the snow covers the fields of battle, and the winds sing songs of betrayal, honor, and heroes, time itself seems to stand still. The past awakens in the voices of those who once looked death in the face, in the voices we shall hear once more today.
The night was quiet over Old Town, save for the soft sighing of the honey wine as it wound through the sleeping city. The starry sept loomed in the distance, its seven-pointed crystal shimmering faintly in the moonlight, while the citadel's many towers stood like silent sentinels, each crowned with a flickering candle that burned for knowledge and learning. In a narrow stone chamber overlooking the river, a young man bent over a page of parchment, the candlelight dancing over silver hair and eyes like polished amethysts. His name was Aemon Targaryen, though here among the Maesters he was simply Aemon of Old Town, a diligent student, humble and soft-spoken, who had long since learned that wisdom shone brighter than crowns. He dipped his quill again and continued to write, his hands steady despite the late hour. Before him lay a scroll concerning the healing of burns with milk of the poppy and aloe, his thoughts focused and unhurried. Around him hung the scent of parchment, wax, and herbs, a perfume he had come to cherish more than the perfumes of court or the silks of Dragonstone. The door creaked. A novice slipped inside, pale and anxious, clutching a sealed letter.
"Maester Valine bade me bring this to you, Aemon," the boy stammered. "It came by Raven, from King's Landing."
Aemon lifted his eyes, surprise flickering across his face.
"King's Landing? At this hour?"
The boy nodded, placed the letter on the table, and left in haste. For a long moment, Aemon only stared at the seal, the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen, pressed deep into black wax. He broke it open with careful fingers, and as his eyes scanned the words, a shadow crossed his face. The letter was short. His father, King Maekar I Targaryen, was dead. Aemon's hand trembled slightly. He set the parchment down and sat back, the breath leaving him in a long sigh. He had known this day would come. His father's health had been failing for years, but the finality of it struck him like a cold wind. For a long while, the room was silent except for the soft flicker of the candle. Then, as he looked again upon the letter, another line caught his eye. "His Grace has left no clear heir. The Great Council must decide the succession. The realm looks to you, Prince Aemon." The words seemed to echo in his mind, heavy and dangerous. He had never sought the throne. His father's crown was a burden he had never desired. Aemon's heart belonged to study, to healing, to peace. Yet now, by blood and by the uncertain laws of men, the Iron Throne might be his to claim. He rose and crossed to the narrow window. Below, the river gleamed silver in the moonlight, and the citadel's towers cast long shadows across the cobbles. Aemon watched them in silence, his thoughts turning dark and uncertain. Behind him, the candles sputtered and died. The next morning, the citadel buzzed with whispers. The novices spoke of dragons, of crowns, of war. Maesters who had once treated Aemon as a student now looked at him with wary deference, as if the Iron Throne itself might appear behind him at any moment. Archmaester Marwyn sought him in the library that afternoon. "So," said the old man, lowering his voice, "the king is dead, and the realm looks to you. Tell me, Aemon, what will you do?" Aemon closed the tome before him. "I will do what duty demands," he said softly. "But I know not yet what that may be." Marwyn snorted, leaning upon his staff. "Duty, a word that bends with the wind. The realm will not wait long for an heir, and there are those in King's Landing who would place a crown upon your head, whether you will it or not. I am a maester, Aemon said. I swore no oaths of rule. I swore to serve. The Archmaester's eyes gleamed. And yet blood speaks louder than vows. You cannot serve if you are slain for another man's ambition. I have seen the way of politics, lad. Once you are named, you cannot remain apart. Aemon bowed his head, saying nothing.
That evening, as the sun bled into the sea, another raven came. This one bore the seal of the hand of the king, Lord Brynden Rivers, the sorcerer knight known as Bloodraven. The letter was curt. Come to King's Landing at once. The council will not wait. The realm needs a king. Aemon folded the letter carefully, though his heart was troubled. He knew what such a summons meant. He would not be free to choose his fate once he reached the capital. That night, sleep eluded him. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams as the sounds of Old Town drifted through the open window. The distant bells of the harbor, the creak of ships, the murmur of the river. He thought of his brothers, Daeron, the drunkard prince, Aerion Brightflame, mad with delusions of godhood, and young Aegon, the boy they called Egg, far away under the care of Sir Duncan the Tall. Each of them carried their father's fire in a different way. But who among them could bear the weight of the 7 kingdoms? At dawn, Aemon rose and began to pack. His fingers lingered on the maester's chain around his neck, the links of silver, iron, and gold that marked a life of learning. He wondered whether it would be enough to guard him against the temptations that awaited him in King's Landing. By midday, a small ship awaited him on the river. The wind smelled of salt and secrets. As he stepped aboard, Aemon turned once more to look back upon the citadel. "May the gods grant me wisdom," he murmured. And with that, the ship set sail for the capital, bearing the man who might have been king. The voyage from Old Town to King's Landing took 12 days, and though the seas were calm, the wind carried unease. Each night, Aemon stood alone upon the deck, watching the dark waters stretch endlessly to the horizon. The moon laid its path of light across the waves, silver and ghostly, like the trail of a dragon's tail. He felt no joy in his journey. Old Town had been a refuge, the citadel, his sanctuary from the heavy heritage of his birth. Now that peace was behind him, and ahead lay a city of masks, King's Landing, where smiles hid knives and every whisper had a master. The ship's captain, a thick-bearded man from the arbor, treated Aemon with wary respect once he learned his name. "Your Grace," he called him, though Aemon corrected him each time. But by the 4th night, the title came unbidden again, as if the man feared some curse for speaking to a prince as anything less. "Your Grace," Aemon murmured to himself once the captain had gone below. "I pray never to hear those words in truth." When at last Blackwater Bay opened before them, the city seemed to rise from the mist, vast, smoke-wreathed, and alive with firelight. The Red Keep crowned Aegon's Hill like a sleeping dragon, its towers cutting through the dawn. Bells tolled from the Sept of Baelor, and the harbor teemed with ships, some flying banners of noble houses, others the black sails of traders and sellswords come to sniff out the scent of change. The Iron Throne was empty, and in Westeros, an empty throne was a beacon for wolves. At the docks, a company of goldcloaks awaited him. Their captain bowed deeply. "By order of Lord Bloodraven, you are to be escorted to the Red Keep at once, Prince Aemon." Aemon inclined his head. "I am no prince here, sir. I am but a maester of the citadel." The captain avoided his gaze. "Aye, as you say, my lord." They rode through the city's winding streets, past vendors crying out the price of fish and fruit, past beggars and orphans who watched the procession with hollow eyes. The smell of smoke and tanneries hung heavy in the air. For all its splendor, King's Landing still stank of its people's hunger.
When they reached the gates of the Red Keep, the guards opened them at once. Inside, the air grew stiller, the sound of the city falling away behind the high stone walls.
Aemon dismounted and was led through corridors he had walked only once before, when he was a boy. In the Tower of the Hand, Lord Brynden Rivers awaited him. Bloodraven was a tall, gaunt man, his skin pale as milk, his hair white as bone. His left eye was gone, and in its place grew a weeping red birthmark that spread across his cheek like a spider's web. His remaining eye was as sharp and cold as a blade. He rose when Aemon entered. "My prince," said Bloodraven in his low, rasping voice, "the realm is restless. You come at a critical hour." Aemon bowed. "I came because you summoned me, Lord Bloodraven. I seek no part in the crown's quarrels." "Yet you are part of them, whether you wish it or not." The hand motioned for him to sit. "Your father's death has left the realm without a clear heir. Prince Aerion is dead, his ashes cast to the wind after his madness consumed him. Prince Daeron, unfit, gods help him. That leaves you and young Aegon, still a boy. The lords are divided. Some whisper your name. Others rally behind the child." "I have no wish to rule," Aemon said, his voice firm. "Let them crown the boy. He is of our blood and has the makings of a better king." Bloodraven studied him for a long while, his one eye unblinking. "The boy's claim rests upon his guardianship under Sir Duncan the Tall, not upon his strength. He has the heart of a child and the counsel of a hedge knight. Do you think the lords will follow him? The Iron Throne needs wisdom, not innocence." "The Iron Throne," Aemon murmured, "needs peace." At that, Bloodraven smiled, though the expression was thin and joyless. "Peace is won by power, not piety. The realm will not stay its hand for your prayers." The room fell silent. The hand leaned forward. "There are those who would raise armies for your sake, Aemon. They whisper that the Citadel sent you here to bring reason to the realm. Others say you will be crowned within the fortnight." "I would rather you chose your course before others choose it for you." Aemon's pulse quickened. "If I refuse?" Bloodraven's single eye glinted. "Then you will have enemies in every corner of the realm. Men who would rather burn the world than see another sit the throne before them." He stood. "Think on it, my prince. You will not have long." That night, Aemon walked the silent halls of the Red Keep. The torches along the walls burned low, their flames throwing shadows across the stones. Every step echoed like a heartbeat. He passed the Hall of Kings, where statues of Targaryens long dead stood watch, Aegon the Conqueror with his sword, Jaehaerys with his scepter, Baelor the Blessed with his praying hands. Aemon paused before them, feeling the weight of their gaze. Each had ruled. Each had left behind blood and fire. He thought of the stories told by his tutors, how Aegon had forged the realm through war, how Jaehaerys had bound it through wisdom, how others had torn it apart through folly. What kind of king would he be if fate demanded it of him? He had no answer, only the whisper of the sea below and the heavy beating of his heart. Before dawn, a knock came upon his chamber door. A young squire entered, clutching a parchment sealed with wax. "My lord," the boy said, "this was left at the door by a hooded man. He said it was for your eyes only." Aemon broke the seal. The words within were written in a hand he recognized, the firm, sharp strokes of his uncle, Prince Maester Daeron, once thought lost to drink and despair. "Do not trust the hand. Bloodraven seeks to make you his puppet. He means to rule through you,
there are others who would see you crowned freely, with the blessing of half the realm. Meet me in the sept at moonrise. Come alone." Aemon lowered the letter slowly. So the game had begun. He set the parchment to the flame of a candle, watching the letters curl and blacken, until nothing remained but ash.
Then he looked out over the city, where the first light of morning touched the towers and rooftops. King's Landing lay before him, a city of schemes, of secrets, of fire. And within its heart, a choice waited to be made. A choice that would decide not only who ruled the Seven Kingdoms, but whether House Targaryen would stand or fall. The Sept of Baelor was vast and hollow in the night, its marble pillars catching the faint light of a dozen candles. The air was thick with incense, the sweet smoke curling toward the seven-faced statues that loomed above the altar. Outside, the bells of King's Landing had fallen silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Aemon entered through the side door, his hood drawn low. His footsteps echoed upon the stone floor, too loud for his liking. He felt the eyes of the carved gods upon him, the father with his stern face, the mother with her gentle smile, the stranger half hidden in shadow. He half expected no one to come. Perhaps it was a trick, a trap laid by Bloodraven's spies. Yet when he neared the altar, a voice whispered from the dark, "So you came after all." From behind one of the pillars stepped a man robed in gray, his silver hair glinting faintly in the candlelight. His face was gaunt, his eyes weary but still sharp with the cunning of his youth. Prince Daeron, once heir to the Iron Throne, now reduced to a ghost haunting the alleys and taverns of the city. "Uncle," Aemon said quietly, "I feared you lost." Daeron gave a dry laugh. "Lost? Aye, in wine and folly. But I have wandered long enough to see the truth of this city. They whisper of kings and crowns, but behind every word lies a dagger. You were wise to come." Aemon studied him carefully. The prince's robe was torn, his hands trembling slightly as he poured wine from a flask into 2 wooden cups. The smell of it was strong, spiced, and bitter. "You sent word that Bloodraven means to use me," Aemon said. "How do you know this?"
"Because he sought to use me first," Daeron replied. "When our father died, Brynden Rivers sent ravens promising me counsel, even pardon for my sins. He said the realm needed a steady hand, a man of Targaryen blood and noble birth. Yet all his words led to one end. He wished for a puppet king. I would not be his puppet, so he turned his eyes to you." Aemon felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "I have no wish to rule." Daeron smiled bitterly. "That is why they will want you. A man who desires no crown is easily guided by those who do." The wind moaned faintly through the high windows. Aemon turned his gaze to the statues. "If I refuse the crown, the realm may fall into war. The lords will rally behind whichever name suits their purpose." Daeron took a slow drink. "Then you must decide which fate you can live with, your own ruin or the realm's." Aemon said nothing. His thoughts were a storm within him. He had come seeking truth, but found only deeper shadows. "Do not trust Bloodraven," Daeron went on, his voice lowering. "And trust not the small council either. They are wolves wrapped in velvet. You must make allies of your own if you hope to survive." "What allies could a Maester claim?" Aemon asked. Daeron's eyes glinted. "There are still those who remember what it means to serve the blood of the dragon. Seek them. But beware, the hand's eyes are everywhere." At that moment, the great doors of the sept creaked open. The sound echoed like thunder. Both men turned sharply. A figure entered, cloaked and hooded, moving with quiet, deliberate steps. No sound but the click of boots on stone.
"Blood ravens, hounds,"
Daeron hissed. Aemon's hand went to the small knife hidden in his sleeve. Not much use against armored men, but it gave him courage. The hooded figure stopped at the edge of the candlelight and threw back the cowl. It was not a guard, but a woman. Her face was pale and fine-boned, her eyes the deep gray of winter skies.
She wore no sigil, only a thin chain of silver and black about her throat, the mark of a maester.
"Peace," she said softly. "I come not to harm you, but to warn you both."
Daeron stared at her warily. "And who in the seven hells are you?"
"I am Maester Lara,"
she said, her voice calm but urgent.
"I serve at the Red Keep, and I serve the truth, though it is perilous to do so."
Her gaze turned to Aemon.
"You are not safe here, my prince. Blood Raven knows of this meeting. His spies shadow your steps. Before dawn, men will come to seize you both. He means to bind you to his will, or see you dead."
Aemon felt the blood drain from his face.
"How do you know this?" "Because I heard the order given," Lara said. "The Hand does not tolerate uncertainty. You are a threat while you still have a choice."
Daeron cursed softly.
"Then we must leave at once."
Aemon nodded, though his heart raced.
"Where can we go?"
Lara looked toward the great doors.
"There are secret passages beneath the sept, old tunnels from Maegor's reign. Follow me."
Without another word, she turned and led them toward the altar. Behind the statue of the stranger, she pressed her hand against the carved stone. There was a faint click, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow stair spiraling down into darkness.
"Go," she urged. "There is little time."
They descended into the damp blackness, the sound of their footsteps swallowed by the stone. The air grew colder, smelling of earth and mold. Above them, faintly, came the echo of armored boots entering the sept. Bloodraven's men had come. Lara's torch flickered as they wound through the tunnels.
"These ways were built when the Faith and the Crown were at war," she whispered. "Few remember them now. They lead to the river, and from there you can flee the city."
Aemon followed close behind her, the dim light glinting off his chain. He glanced back once and saw Daeron struggling to keep pace, muttering curses between gasps.
Then came a noise, the faint scrape of metal on stone.
Lara froze.
"They found another entrance," she said. "Quickly, this way."
They turned down a side passage, the torchlight dancing wildly. The tunnel split ahead into two directions. Lara stopped, indecision flickering across her face.
"Left leads toward the river," she said. "Right, toward the crypts below the Red Keep."
Daeron drew his knife. "We'll never make the river before dawn. We take the crypts." Aemon hesitated, then nodded.
"Lead on."
They turned right and hurried deeper, the ground sloping downward until the walls opened into a vast cavern of carved stone. Here lay the tombs of long-dead kings, marble effigies with dragon wings, candles long since melted to dust. The air was colder still, heavy with the weight of ages. Daeron sank against a pillar, breathing hard.
"We can rest a moment."
But Lara shook her head.
"No, we must keep moving. The Hand's spies."
Before she could finish, a shadow moved among the tombs. A soft voice spoke from the darkness. "So this is where the loyal sons of Maekar hide." From behind one of the sarcophagi stepped a tall man clad in black and crimson armor, his half-mask gleaming in the torchlight. The red birthmark upon his cheek was unmistakable. Lord Bloodraven himself had come. Aemon's breath caught. The torch wavered in Lara's hand. Daron swore and lifted his knife, though it trembled in his grasp. Bloodraven smiled, a cold, mirthless thing. "Did you think I would not know? The city is mine to see. Every raven, every whisper, every dream that stirs the night." He stepped closer, his one pale eye fixed on Aemon. "You should have stayed at the Citadel, boy. You were safe there." Aemon drew himself upright. "If you mean to slay me, then do it. But I will not wear a crown forged from deceit." Bloodraven's smile faded. "I mean to save you from yourself. The realm will not survive another weak king."
I would see you upon the throne, not for my sake, but for the realm's.
"You would rule in my name," Aemon said bitterly. "Better a puppet who brings peace than a child who brings war." Lara stepped forward. "Peace built upon fear is no peace at all." Bloodraven's gaze flicked to her, and his voice turned soft as silk. "And yet, you serve me still, Maester. Or so I thought." Lara raised her chin. "Not any longer." For a moment, silence filled the crypts. Then Bloodraven sighed. "So be it." He raised his hand. From the shadows behind him, armed men emerged, their swords gleaming. "Seize them," said the hand of the king. And the crypts of the Red Keep erupted into chaos. Steel clashed and rang through the tombs of dragons. The air filled with the smell of dust and old bones as torches guttered, throwing wild shadows against the stone walls. Bloodraven's guards poured into the crypt like wraiths of iron, their blades flashing in the dim light. Aemon felt the rush of fear in his chest, but it was not the fear of death. It was the cold knowledge that this was the end of choice. He snatched a fallen sword from the ground, awkward in his scholar's hands, and placed himself between the soldiers and Lara. Daron fought like a man half-mad, shouting curses as he parried and stumbled, his knife slick with blood. He had been drunk for years, but in that moment, the old fire of the dragon returned. He lunged at a guard, slashing his throat before another's blade pierced his side. "Go, Aemon!" he gasped, coughing blood. "Go while you can!" Aemon hesitated, one heartbeat too long. Bloodraven stepped forward, his crimson cloak brushing the stone floor. "Yield," he said, his voice like the hiss of a sword drawn from its sheath. "No harm need come to you." Lara threw a vial at the ground between them. Smoke burst forth, thick and white, stinging their eyes. "This way!" she cried. Aemon grabbed Daron by the arm, half dragging him toward a narrow archway at the back of the crypt.
Lara led the way, her torch bobbing through the haze. Behind them, Bloodraven's voice echoed cold and sure. "Find them! Seal every passage!" They fled through a corridor so low Aemon had to stoop, the air growing damp and foul. The sound of pursuit faded, replaced by the ragged breathing of the wounded prince. When at last they emerged into a forgotten tunnel that sloped upward, Aemon stopped to bind Daron's wound. "You cannot carry me," Daron rasped, pale as wax. "Leave me here. The stranger waits." "I will not leave you," Aemon said fiercely, pressing a strip of torn cloak against the wound. But Daron's hand caught his wrist. "Listen to me, boy. There's no throne worth your soul. You were born to heal, not to rule. Remember that." Aemon shook his head, refusing to hear. Yet Daron's eyes were already glazing, his breath faltering. Lara laid a hand upon Aemon's shoulder. "He is gone." Aemon bowed his head, closing his uncle's eyes. For a moment,
all the world seemed still. The flickering torchlight painted the stones red as blood. "We must keep moving," Lara said softly. "Bloodraven will not rest until he has you." They climbed the tunnel in silence until, at last, the air freshened and a faint shimmer of moonlight showed through a grating above. Lara pried it open with a length of broken iron, and they crawled out into a forgotten courtyard choked with ivy. Beyond the walls, King's Landing slept. Aemon stood beneath the stars, the cool air washing over his face. For the first time since leaving Old Town, he breathed freely, but his heart was heavy with grief and fire. "Where will you go?" Lara asked. "Anywhere the hand's eyes cannot reach," Aemon said. "The realm will choose its king without me." Lara hesitated. "You mean to flee the city alone? Bloodraven has spies in every port. You will not pass unseen." "I must try." She looked at him, the torchlight soft against her face. "Then I will go with you." "You have risked enough for me." Her eyes glinted.
Knowledge and duty brought me to the Citadel, but truth brought me to you. If you fall, all I have done will mean nothing. He wanted to protest, but her words carried the quiet certainty of one who had already chosen her path. So he nodded. "Very well. We leave before dawn." They moved like shadows through the sleeping city, slipping through alleys where cats prowled and beggars dreamed beside dying fires. The Red Keep loomed behind them, its towers wreathed in mist. Once, Aemon had seen it as a symbol of his family's strength. Now it seemed to him a cage of stone and fire, where dragons devoured their own. At the harbor, they found the docks guarded, soldiers posted at every pier. Bloodraven's reach was already there. So they turned north, following the narrow lanes to the flea-bottom outskirts, where the smell of the river mixed with rot and ale. They came upon a tumble-down inn called the Dragon's Hand, its sign creaking in the wind. Within, the room was dim, lit by a single lantern that threw light upon a handful of rough men drinking ale. The innkeeper, a broad-shouldered man with a scar across his cheek, looked up as they entered. His eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Lara stepped forward. "We need a boat, quietly and before sunrise." The man's gaze flicked to Aemon. "You've got a fine cloak for one who speaks of quiet travel." Aemon pulled back his hood, letting the lantern catch the silver of his hair. The man froze. "By the gods, a Targaryen! You see now why we must go unseen," Aemon said. "Help us, and you will have gold enough to last a lifetime." The innkeeper swallowed hard. "There's a smuggler I know, name of Othar Pike. He runs night tides to the Blackwater's mouth. I can fetch him, but if the gold cloaks come sniffing, I never saw you." "Agreed," said Lara. The man hurried out. Aemon and Lara took seats near the back, the firelight flickering across their faces. For a while, there was only silence, broken by the mutter of the few patrons who remained.
"You trust him?"
Aemon asked quietly.
"I trust desperation," Lara said. "Men in Flea Bottom value coin over crowns." Aemon managed a faint smile. "Then perhaps we are safe." But as the moments passed, unease crept through him like chill water. The fire burned lower, the voices dwindled. Outside, a faint sound echoed, a horn, distant but growing nearer. Lara's eyes met his. "They're searching the docks." He rose. "We must go now." They slipped through the back door into the alley, but even as they did, shouts rose in the distance. Torches flared along the waterfront, and the glint of armor caught the moonlight. "Bloodraven's men," Lara whispered. Aemon grasped her hand. "This way!" They darted through the maze of streets, past the stinking tanneries and shuttered stalls, until they reached a narrow quay where a single skiff rocked in the tide. A man stood beside it, a lean smuggler with sharp eyes and salt-streaked hair. "Othar Pike?" Lara asked. "Aye," the man replied, scanning the darkness. "You're the ones the innkeep sent. Gods, you've stirred a hornet's nest. The gold cloaks are everywhere." "Can you take us out to sea?" Aemon asked. "I can try, but once we're past the harbor chain, there's no turning back." "Then we go," said Aemon. They pushed off just as torches flared on the docks behind them. Arrows hissed through the night, splashing into the black water. Othar cursed and bent to the oars, pulling hard as the skiff glided between the ships. The wind was sharp with salt. King's Landing receded into the mist, its fires dimming like dying stars. Lara looked back once. "He will not forgive this." "No," Aemon said quietly. "Bloodraven never forgives." Ahead, the mouth of the Blackwater opened wide to the sea, the sky pale with the first hint of dawn. For a heartbeat, the world seemed still again.
Aemon turned his gaze northward, toward the unseen lands beyond, the mountains, the cold, the unknown. He felt the pull of destiny in the wind, though he could not yet name it. "I have turned my back on crowns," he murmured, almost to himself. "Let the gods decide what remains." And as the first light touched the waves, the ship carried them out into the gray waters of freedom and exile, while behind them, the Red Keep watched like a dragon that never slept. The skiff rode the tide for hours, cutting through the dark waters like a sliver of shadow. By the time the sun broke over the eastern sea, the city of King's Landing had vanished behind a veil of mist and distance. The wind carried only the faintest echo of its noise and smoke. For the first time in many days, Aemon felt the chains of the Red Keep fall away from his thoughts. Yet freedom, he soon learned, was a fragile thing. The smuggler Othar Pike rode with tireless arms, his jaw set and his eyes narrowed against the morning glare. "We'll keep to the coast," he said, between strokes. "The gold cloaks'll have ships searching the main lanes, but they won't dare the cliffs of Massey's Hook. Too many reefs, too many ghosts." "Ghosts?" Lara asked, wrapping her cloak tight against the wind. Othar gave a crooked grin. "Aye, sailors say the sea off the Hook remembers every ship that ever broke upon its rocks. Some nights you can hear the dead oarsmen rowing, trying to find their way home." Aemon said nothing. The words stirred a strange ache in him, the thought of the lost and the forgotten, forever bound to the waters they had trusted. The sea grew rougher as they neared the Hook. Waves crashed against black stone, sending up sprays of salt. The sky darkened with gathering clouds, and gulls screamed overhead. "Storm's coming," Othar muttered. "We'll have to find shelter." He steered the skiff toward a narrow cove where the cliffs rose steep and jagged. A hidden inlet appeared between them, half concealed by seaweed and shadow. They rowed inside, the sound of the storm fading behind the stone walls. There they made land upon a strip of sand beneath an overhanging ledge. A small cave yawned nearby, its mouth dark but dry. Othar tied the skiff to a rock and began unloading their packs. "We'll wait out the storm here," he said. "Best keep a fire low and no smoke, else a patrol ship may spy us." Lara knelt to gather driftwood. "If Bloodraven's ravens have wings enough to find us here, then we may as well burn the whole cliff." Aemon managed a faint smile at that, though the name of the hand still weighed upon him like lead. He turned his gaze toward the sea, where lightning flickered on the horizon.
The smell of rain filled the air, sharp and heavy. As the storm broke, thunder rolled across the cliffs, and rain poured down in silver sheets. The three huddled near the fire's glow, the cave's shadows deepening behind them. Othar gnawed on a strip of dried fish and said, "If I may speak bold, Your Grace, do not call me that," Aemon interrupted gently. "I am no king." The smuggler gave a shrug. Begging your pardon, sir, but the world won't care what you call yourself. Bloodraven will still want your head." Lara stirred the fire with a stick. "He means to end all threats to the Iron Throne. As long as Aemon lives, he fears division." "Division," Aemon echoed. "It is not division he fears. It is choice. He would rule every man's heart if he could." The storm raged on. The fire crackled, throwing gold across the wet stone. Outside, waves hammered the rocks, and the cries of seabirds vanished into the wind. At length, Othar leaned back against the wall. "When the sea calms, I'll take you farther north. To Duskendale, perhaps, or Gulltown if you've the coin. But tell me this, Maester. What will you do when the realm forgets your name?" Aemon gazed into the flames.
"That is what I pray for."
Lara looked at him sharply.
You cannot run forever. Even if Bloodraven falls, others will come. The throne calls to those who carry dragon blood. He met her eyes. Then let it call in vain.
The wind moaned through the cave's mouth, and for a while none spoke. But the silence did not last. Sometime near midnight, Othar stirred from his place by the wall and frowned. "Do you hear that?" Aemon listened. At first, he heard only the rain and the distant roar of waves. Then, faintly, a different sound reached his ears. The low creak of oars. Lara rose at once. "Ships!" They doused the fire, plunging the cave into darkness. Aemon moved to the mouth and peered into the storm. Out on the black water, torchlight flickered like stars upon the tide. Several small boats glided through the rain, their prows marked with red banners that bled color into the waves. "The Hand's men," Othar muttered. "How in the seven hells did they find us?" "Perhaps they didn't," said Aemon. "Perhaps they seek only shelter." But as one of the boats turned toward the cove, the glint of steel upon its deck told him otherwise. "They know," Lara whispered. Othar drew his dagger. "We'll not outrow them in this storm. There's another way out of the cave, up through the rocks. A goat trail leads to the cliffs. Go, I'll follow." Aemon hesitated, but Lara seized his arm. "Now!" They scrambled up the slick rocks, rain lashing their faces. Behind them came shouts, the crash of men leaping ashore, the ring of swords. The storm howled louder, drowning all else. At last, they reached the top of the cliffs, the wind near tearing them from their feet. Lightning split the sky, showing a path that wound upward through the heather. They ran, half stumbling, the world a blur of wind and water. When they finally stopped, breathless, Aemon looked back. Far below, torches flickered like fireflies along the shore.
Othar's skiff still bobbed near the rocks, but the smuggler himself was nowhere to be seen.
"He bought us time," Lara said softly. Aemon closed his eyes. "May the Mother keep him." They pressed on through the night, guided only by lightning and the faint rise of land beneath their feet. The storm slowly weakened, the thunder growing distant. By dawn, they stood upon the edge of a grassy moor, the sea far behind them. Mist clung to the earth, and the air smelled of pine and wet stone. A ruined watchtower stood nearby, half swallowed by ivy. "There," said Lara. "We can rest." Inside the ruin, they found only broken stairs and the bones of birds. Yet it offered shelter enough. Aemon sank against the wall, exhaustion pressing upon him like a weight. "You could have been king," Lara said quietly after a while. "You still could, if you turned back." He looked at her, his eyes weary but steady. "I could have been many things, but a king's life is not his own. I would rather live as a man who chose peace than die as a ruler who brought ruin." She nodded slowly. "Then where will peace take you?" Aemon stared northward, where the mists thickened over the hills. "There are places beyond the reach of thrones. The Wall, perhaps. The Night's Watch swears no fealty to kings." Lara's lips parted in surprise. "You would take the Black?" "If that is the price of peace, yes." He smiled faintly. "A maester can serve there as well as anywhere. And in the cold, even the dragon's fire may sleep." The wind sighed through the broken tower. Far off, gulls cried over the sea. For a long while, neither spoke. Then Lara said softly, "If you go north, I will go with you." Aemon met her gaze. "The Watch takes no wives." Her smile was sad but steady. "Then I will serve as a maester, as you once did. The realm needs healing, Aemon, not crowns." Outside, the dawn light broke upon the horizon, pale and uncertain. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean.
Aemon rose, pulling his cloak tighter about his shoulders. "Then north we go," he said, "away from kings, away from crowns, and toward the edge of the world." And so began the long road that would end at the Wall, the road of exile, sacrifice, and quiet destiny. The road that would one day make Maester Aemon of the Night's Watch a man remembered not for the throne he refused, but for the wisdom that saved him from it. The northern road was long and cruel. Cold winds swept down from the mountains of the moon, and the days grew shorter as Aemon and Lara pressed on. They passed through small villages that huddled like secrets beneath gray skies, places forgotten by kings and spared the weight of crowns. At first they traveled by night, wary of riders who might still bear Bloodraven's orders. But as the miles stretched behind them and the scent of salt gave way to pine and earth, their caution softened into weary endurance. The land itself seemed to guard them, cloaking their trail in mist and rain. Once, when they stopped at a shepherd's hut near the Trident, the old man who lived there offered them broth and shelter. His eyes, clouded with age, lingered on Aemon's silver hair. "You've the look of dragon folk," he said. "But that's not so rare these days. A few of your kin still pass through, heading north to escape debts or wars. Strange folk, all of them." Aemon smiled faintly. "We seek no war, Goodman. Only peace." "Peace?" The shepherd laughed softly. "Then you've come to the wrong realm, stranger. There's no peace left anywhere south of the Wall." The words lingered with Aemon long after they had left the hut behind. Perhaps the man was right. Perhaps the Wall was the only place left where peace could be found, cold, silent, and bound by oath. A fortnight later, they reached the great fork of the King's Road. To the west lay the Vale of Arryn, shrouded in pale cloud. To the east, the long road that climbed steadily toward the neck. They turned north. Travel grew harder. The forests thickened. The air turned damp and chill. The songs of birds faded into the whisper of wind through branches. Each night they built small fires and kept watch by turns, for wolves prowled the edges of the light. One night, as rain hissed against the trees, Lara stirred the coals and said quietly,
"When you reach the Wall, will you truly swear the vows?"
Aemon looked up from the parchment in his hands, notes he had taken along the road, observations of herbs and healing. Aye, the watch offers a life of service. That is what I was born for.
You were born for more than chains and walls, she said. The blood in your veins.
He stopped her with a gesture. The blood in my veins has brought more ruin than good. Let it rest. The watch will be my atonement. Lara fell silent. Outside, an owl called mournfully, and the fire crackled low. Before dawn, they were roused by the sound of hooves on wet earth. Aemon peered through the trees and saw torchlight flickering along the road. Riders, armored and disciplined. Lara's hand went to the knife at her belt.
Bloodraven's men?
Aemon shook his head. No, their banners bear the direwolf, northern men. They waited until the riders drew near enough to see clearly. At their head rode a tall man with a cloak of gray fur and a face stern as stone. His eyes caught the firelight, a pale, almost colorless blue. "Who travels the King's Road before sunrise?" he called. Aemon stepped forward, bowing slightly. "Two travelers bound for the wall, my lord. We mean no harm." The man dismounted, studying him with keen curiosity. "You've the look of Valyria about you, and the manner of a maester. Yet you wear no black." "I was once of the Citadel," Aemon said. "Now I seek the Night's Watch." The man nodded slowly. "Then you ride north for duty, not exile. I am Roderick Stark of Winterfell. My men and I ride to White Harbor. You may share our fire tonight." Grateful, Aemon accepted. Around the Starks' camp, he found himself among men who spoke little, but whose silence carried respect rather than suspicion. Lara tended a wounded soldier's arm, earning murmurs of thanks. That night, as the fire burned bright against the northern wind, Lord Roderick sat beside Aemon. "You're learned," he said. "Your speech has weight. I'd wager there's more to your journey than vows." Aemon smiled faintly. "All men carry secrets north, my lord. The cold burns them away in time." Roderick's gaze held his for a long moment, then he nodded. "Well said. The Watch will need men like you. Winter grows longer every year. Some say darker things stir beyond the wall." Aemon listened, but said nothing. The talk of shadows and whispers beyond the wall seemed more fable than truth, but he had learned that fables often hid the realm's cruelest truths. By morning, the Stark company rode westward, leaving Aemon and Lara once more alone upon the road. They pressed on through the neck, crossing causeways where the bogs steamed in the dawn. There were whispers of bandits and sellswords, but none troubled them. Whether by fate or by mercy, their path remained clear. Weeks passed before the great shadow of the wall rose before them, an endless stretch of black ice glimmering faintly in the dying light of day. It loomed above the trees like a mountain forged by the gods. Aemon stopped at the crest of a hill, breath catching in his chest. "By the Seven," he whispered. "It's greater than I ever imagined." Lara followed his gaze. "And colder, I'd wager." They reached Castle Black as the sun sank behind the wall. Smoke curled from the chimneys, and the sound of axes echoed faintly through the yard. Men in black cloaks moved about their duties, some old, some young, all with the weary air of those who had left their pasts behind. At the gate, a grizzled sergeant eyed them warily. "What business have you here?" "I come to take the vows," Aemon said, "and to serve as a healer if the Watch has need of one." The man looked him up and down. "We always have need of healers. And what of her?" Lara stepped forward. "I am a Maester of the Citadel, trained in medicine and counsel. I come to serve also." The sergeant grunted.
The watch swears no women, but the Lord Commander will hear your plea." They were brought before the Lord Commander that very night. He was a broad-shouldered man named Jaor Hill, a bastard of House Mormont, whose voice was deep as the northern wind. "You would take the black?" he asked Aemon. "Do you know what that means?"
"I do," Aemon replied. "I forsake all claim, all name, all family. I will serve until death."
The Lord Commander studied him for a long moment. I believe you. There's honesty in your eyes, and sorrow enough for 10 lifetimes. The watch will have you." He turned to Lara. "As for you, the wall is no place for a woman, maester or not. But if you wish to remain as healer under the vows of the Citadel, I'll not refuse." She inclined her head.
"I ask no more."
And so it was done. Aemon Targaryen, once a prince, became a brother of the Night's Watch. His silver hair was shorn, his maester's chain hung beside his black cloak, and his name was spoken no more. He was simply Aemon, servant of the realm, watcher on the wall. In the days that followed, he learned the rhythm of life at Castle Black, the watchtowers and their fires, the calls of the horn, the bitter wind that never slept. At night, he would stand atop the wall, gazing northward into the white wilderness. The wind carried strange whispers, cracks of ice, the distant cry of wolves. He often thought of Bloodraven and the throne he had left behind. Yet, with each passing day, the weight of that choice grew lighter. One night, as he stood beneath the stars, Lara joined him.
"Do you regret it?"
she asked quietly. Aemon shook his head. "No. Here, a man's worth is measured by his service, not his birth. For the first time, I feel free." She smiled.
"Then perhaps peace can exist after all."
Aemon looked northward, where the aurora shimmered faintly against the horizon like dragonfire in the dark. "Perhaps," he said, "though peace, like light, must be guarded, and there will always be shadows waiting beyond the wall." He turned from the edge, the cold biting deep into his bones. The prince who might have been king was gone. In his place stood Maester Aemon of the Night's Watch, a man who had traded crown for wisdom and fire for frost. And in that frozen silence, his legend began, not of power, but of sacrifice, carved in ice and memory. Winter's shadow deepened upon the wall. The months passed in quiet labor, and the cold grew sharper with each turn of the moon. The wind that scoured the ice seemed to carry voices, low murmurs, half heard through the endless night. And though the brothers of the Watch laughed at such tales, Aemon sometimes wondered whether the old gods whispered through the frost. He had taken the vows beneath the heart tree, as all new brothers must, and its pale bark and red leaves still haunted his dreams. "Night gathers," he had sworn, "and now my watch begins." The words clung to him more tightly than any chain. Aemon found his place quickly within the order. In the mornings he tended the sick and wounded, setting bones and brewing tinctures in the rookery's shadowed halls. At noon he taught letters to the younger recruits, his voice calm and patient over the crackle of the hearth. When evening fell, he climbed the long stair to the top of the wall, where the wind roared unceasing and the world below seemed lost to time. The other brothers spoke of him with quiet respect, calling him the Maester who asks nothing. He never sought command or comfort, and his eyes, once bright with the fire of youth, had grown gentle with a peace few men understood. Lara remained, though the watch had not bound her by vow.
She served in the infirmary, her skill with herbs and wounds earning the grudging admiration of even the hardest rangers. At times, Aemon would find her standing by the fire after a long night, her hair silvered by frost, her expression distant. "You should rest," he would say softly. She would smile faintly.
"And leave the sick to the stranger's mercy. You know I cannot." He would return her smile, though sorrow flickered behind it. For a while, their days flowed as calm as the frozen rivers beyond the wall. But peace, Aemon had learned, never lingers long in the realm of men. It began with the ravens. One morning, as Aemon climbed the rookery steps to feed the birds, he found them restless, wings beating against their cages. Their eyes glimmered black and frantic. When he approached, they fell silent, all save one, a great white raven that bore the citadel's seal. He took the letter it carried, broke the wax, and read by the light of the brazier. The words struck him like cold iron. King Aegon V Targaryen had taken the Iron Throne. His young brother, the same boy Aemon had called Egg in childhood, now ruled the realm. The letter bore tidings of his coronation and a request, no, a plea from the new king himself. "Come home, brother. I have need of your counsel. The realm stands uncertain, and your wisdom is wanted more than your vows." Aemon stood long after the fire had died, the parchment trembling in his hand. Lara found him there an hour later. "Another raven?" she asked, seeing the shadow in his eyes. "Aye," he said softly. "From my brother." She read the first lines and looked up. "He asks you to return?" Aemon nodded. "He means well, but he does not understand what he asks." "Will you go?" He turned toward the small window, where the snow fell thick against the glass. "I swore the oath of the watch. A king's blood cannot unbind a man's word." "And yet," Lara said gently, "you love him." Aemon's gaze softened. "Aye, more than he will ever know."
But love cannot stand above duty. He burned the letter that night, the flames devouring his brother's words until only ash remained. In the weeks that followed, rumors drifted north with the traders and the wandering Black Brothers. They spoke of dragons long dead and prophecies reborn, of strange lights in the east and the Targaryen king's dreams of fire. Some whispered that Bloodraven himself had vanished from court, accused of sorcery and exiled to the Night's Watch. When word of this reached Castle Black, even the hard-faced rangers muttered uneasily. Aemon said little, though his thoughts turned often to the man who had once sought to make him a king. The day Bloodraven arrived, the wall lay buried under snow. A storm had passed in the night, leaving the sky white as milk. A horn sounded from the gatehouse, and Aemon went out to see the newcomers. There were but two, a black-cloaked ranger and an older man riding beside him. The older man's hair was white as bone, and a red birthmark stretched like veins across his hollow cheek. His single eye found Aemon at once, and though its fire was dimmed, it still burned with that strange, terrible knowledge. "Lord Brynden Rivers," Aemon said quietly. Bloodraven dismounted, his movements slow but sure. "Maester Aemon, or should I call you brother now?" The men at the gate glanced between them, but said nothing. There was a weight in the air, as if the wall itself listened. Aemon inclined his head. "The Watch welcomes all who take its vows." A faint smile touched Bloodraven's lips. "Even the ghosts of kings' hands? Especially them." They stood a moment in silence, the snow swirling between them.
At last, Aemon said, "Why have you come, my lord?" Bloodraven looked up at the wall's towering face. "Exile, judgment, perhaps redemption, if the gods still count me among the living." He met Aemon's gaze again. "I am old, and I see too much. I came north to see less." Aemon studied him.
The once feared sorcerer looked frail now, the years carved deep into his skin. Yet the air about him still carried something of that strange power, a whisper of unseen wings. "Then perhaps the wall will give you peace," Aemon said. Bloodraven's smile faded. "Peace is for those who forget. I remember too much." That night, as the brothers drank by the fire, the new arrival sat apart, his one eye reflecting the flames. Some of the younger men whispered that he could see through walls, that his birds still flew between dreams. Aemon said nothing to silence them. Later, when the hall had emptied, he approached Bloodraven, where he sat alone. "You were right," Aemon said quietly. "The realm needed strength, not wisdom. And yet your strength drove you here." Bloodraven's voice was low, almost tender. "The realm devours all who serve it too well. I warned you once that a crown is a curse. You fled it. I wore its shadow and was unmade by it. In that, at least, we are kin." Aemon nodded. "Perhaps the watch was meant for both of us." "Perhaps," said Bloodraven, his gaze distant. "But my watch will not end upon these stones. There are other callings in the cold." Aemon frowned. "What do you mean?" The older man's one eye gleamed faintly, like an ember beneath ash. "When the last light dies in the south, another must be kindled in the north. Remember that, Maester. The wall is not the end. It is the beginning." He rose and left without another word, his black cloak trailing across the snow. Aemon stood long in the yard, staring after him. The wind moaned through the cracks in the ice, carrying with it the endless voice of winter. He thought of his brother upon the Iron Throne, of the dragons that no longer flew, of the blood that burned quietly in his veins even now. Perhaps, he thought, Bloodraven was right. The wall was not an ending. It was a threshold. He turned his gaze northward, where the aurora danced faintly against the stars, green and silver and ghostly white. Beyond that frozen horizon lay the mysteries no king could rule, no maester could measure. "Peace," he murmured to the cold air. "May it hold while it can." The wind answered, and somewhere in the dark, a raven called, a single, lonely cry echoing across the snow. Aemon drew his cloak close and returned to his chambers. Tomorrow would bring another dawn, another watch, another test of faith. But tonight, for the first time since the citadel, he slept without dreams of crowns or fire. The prince was gone. Only the watcher remained. The seasons turned, though upon the wall they all wore the same face, winter's. Years bled one into the next, and Aemon's hair, once bright silver, grew thin and white as frost. He walked the same paths each day, the rookery, the yard, the long stair to the icy summit, and though his steps slowed, his purpose never wavered. The cold, he often thought, had a way of stripping men down to what they truly were. At Castle Black, life endured through routine. Each morning, the horn sounded to rouse the watch. The gates opened for ranging parties bound into the haunted forest,
and the forges burned to mend armor worn thin by years. Aemon tended the injured who returned and sent prayers for those who did not. The brothers came to him not only for healing, but for counsel, for in his calm voice they found a quiet strength greater than steel. "Maester," one would say, sitting upon the bench beside him, "what makes a man good?" And Aemon would answer, "The memory of what he loves, even when all else is taken." It was a simple truth, born of long reflection and quiet pain. Yet men listened to him, for they sensed the weight of a life measured by sacrifice. Lara remained still, though she had taken to wearing the black of the watch in solidarity with those she served. Her once dark hair was streaked with silver now, her eyes sharpened by years of vigilance.
She worked beside Aemon, brewing medicines, mending bones, and reading aloud the old histories when his sight began to fade. "You are too stubborn to yield to age," she teased once, as he fumbled for a quill. "Age has never been my enemy," he replied, smiling faintly. "It is a teacher with a slower tongue." At times, when the fire burned low, she would read him the reports sent from the south, letters that spoke of a realm changing faster than the snows melted. He listened in silence, his hands folded upon the table. "King Aegon seeks peace," she said one evening, scanning a scroll. "He has ended the wars of the Blackfires. There is talk of reforming the realm." Aemon bowed his head. "My brother always dreamed of better things. But peace is a fragile bird, easily frightened." Indeed, the years brought new whispers even to the far north. Strange tidings drifted on the wind, of dragons in prophecy, of fire rekindled in the blood of kings, and of shadows stirring beyond the wall. Men laughed off such tales, but Aemon's heart stirred with unease. One autumn morning, when the mist lay thick across the yard, a horn sounded from the east gate. A lone ranger returned, his horse staggering beneath him. His skin was pale with cold, his eyes wide with terror. "They're out there," he rasped, as Aemon and Lara lifted him down. "Eyes like blue fire. They move in silence. The dead walk." The yard fell still. Even the crows upon the ramparts ceased their cries. Aemon felt the chill deepen, though no wind stirred. "Bring him inside," he ordered softly. "Quickly now." They laid the ranger near the hearth, but his body was already stiffening. The breath left him in a single sigh, and he was gone. Later, when the Lord Commander came to see the corpse, Aemon spoke quietly. "There are stories older than the citadel," he said, "of dead men who rise when the cold is strongest. We may have to remember such tales again." The Lord Commander frowned. "You mean the others?" "They are children's ghosts, Maester."
"Then pray they stay that way," Aemon murmured. That night he could not sleep. He walked the wall instead, leaning upon his staff. The stars burned hard and clear above, and the wind carved strange music through the ice. As he gazed northward toward the white emptiness, he thought he saw faint lights dancing far beyond the forest, pale as moonlight upon snow. When he returned to his chamber, Lara awaited him, cloak wrapped tight. "I thought you might go wandering," she said softly. "The wind wakes old ghosts." "It carries whispers of things long forgotten," he said. "I fear the world beyond the wall stirs once more." She laid a hand on his arm. "If the dead rise, then so must the living. The watch will stand." He looked at her for a long moment, seeing the strength in her eyes, the unspoken bond that had endured through years of duty. "The watch will stand," he echoed, "but not forever. Nothing built by men endures forever." Then let it endure through us, she said simply. And so they worked harder than before, preparing medicines, gathering records, strengthening the sick. Word spread among the brothers that Maester Aemon feared a coming winter greater than any in living memory. Few dismissed him outright, for even the youngest recruits felt the weight of the air, the stillness before a storm unseen. One evening, when the last of autumn's sun bled red across the ice, a raven arrived from the south. Its wings were tipped with frost, its eyes dull with exhaustion. Aemon took the scroll from its leg and opened it with trembling fingers. The seal bore a 3-headed dragon. He read the letter twice before speaking. "King Aegon is dead," he said at last, his voice a whisper. Lara bowed her head. "I am sorry." "The Citadel names his eldest son, Duncan, as heir," Aemon continued. "But Duncan has forsaken his crown for love. The realm burns again in doubt." He closed his eyes. The years seemed to fall upon him all at once.
My brother dreamed of peace, but even his dreams end in fire. That night he sat alone in the rookery, surrounded by the soft rustle of wings. The ravens waited, their black eyes bright in the torchlight. Aemon dipped his quill and began to write, not as prince nor as maester, but as a man leaving a trace of himself upon the page. He wrote of duty and of choice, of the price of crowns, and of the thin line between wisdom and regret. When he was done, he sealed the letter and tied it to a raven's leg. "Fly south," he whispered, "to any who still remember mercy." The bird took flight, vanishing into the cold night. Years passed. Bloodraven left the wall, vanishing into the forest beyond with a small company of men. Some said he sought old magic, others that he had gone to die. Aemon never saw him again, though on certain nights he fancied he could feel the man's gaze watching from the shadows, patient and eternal. Lara's health began to fail soon after. The winters had grown too long, and the damp chill took hold of her lungs. Aemon tended her with every draught and herb he knew, but nothing availed. "You saved many," she whispered one night, her hand trembling in his. "Now you must let me go." He bowed his head. "Not yet." But she smiled, faint and peaceful. "You found your peace long ago, Aemon. Keep it. Don't let grief steal what you've earned." She died before dawn. The wall seemed colder after that, its silence heavier. Aemon buried her beyond the yard, beneath the shadow of the heart tree where he had once sworn his vows. He marked the grave with no name, only a smooth stone. He spent the next day in solitude, his thoughts wandering between past and present, between the halls of Old Town, the fires of King's Landing, and the endless white of the north. By nightfall, the sky had turned clear again, and the aurora shimmered faintly above the horizon. Aemon lifted his eyes and whispered into the wind, "Farewell, my friend. May the gods grant you warmth beyond the wall." He returned to his chamber, his joints aching, his vision dimming. Yet in his heart there was no sorrow, only a deep, abiding calm. For he knew, at last, that his choice, the choice to turn from the crown, had been the right one. And though the wall still loomed, vast and eternal, Aemon Targaryen no longer feared its shadow. For he had become part of it, the quiet watcher, the keeper of memory, the man who had chosen peace over power. The night beyond might never end, but within that darkness, one small, steady flame still burned. Winter's teeth had sunk deep into the north.
The sky remained a dim gray canopy, and snow lay upon the wall in heavy drifts, muting every sound. The fires in the yard burned low, their smoke rising in sluggish spirals that vanished into the white air. In the rookery, the ravens were restless again, fluttering, croaking, uneasy. Aemon Targaryen, now old as the ice itself, felt the same disquiet stirring within him. His hands trembled as he poured hot water over herbs, the scent of mint and willow filling the small chamber. His joints ached, and his eyes had grown cloudy with age, yet his mind remained sharp. Some days, when he looked into the fire, he saw faces long dead, his father's stern brow, his brother Egg's boyish grin, the knowing eye of Bloodraven, half shadow and half man. Others he saw the wall itself, as though it breathed, alive with the memory of those who had sworn their lives to its silence. The knock upon his door came just before dusk. "Enter," Aemon said, his voice frail but steady. A young steward stepped in, his cheeks flushed from the cold. "Maester, a rider's come from the south. He brings word from the citadel. Says it's urgent." Aemon nodded. "Bring him." Moments later, the rider entered. A man no older than 20, his cloak white with frost, his eyes dark and weary. He bowed.
"Maester Aemon, I bear the greetings of Archmaester Vaelin of Old Town." He produced a scroll sealed with the chain and quill. "This was meant for your eyes alone." Aemon broke the seal with care. The parchment crackled as he unrolled it. The words were short, written in a hand he recognized from decades past. "The realm mourns once more. King Jaehaerys, son of Aegon, is dead. His heir, Aerys, now sits the Iron Throne. The Citadel recalls you, if you still live, for counsel in these uncertain times." The rider waited in silence as Aemon read. When he was done, the old man folded the scroll and stared into the brazier's embers. "Aerys," he murmured, "another child born of dragons, another flame waiting to consume itself." The rider shifted uneasily. "Shall I tell them you will come, Maester?" Aemon shook his head. "Tell them I am dead. Tell them the wall has claimed me, as it claims all men." The young man hesitated. "But do as I say," Aemon said, more firmly this time. Then, softer, "The realm no longer needs another Targaryen's counsel. It needs deliverance from the fire that burns it." When the rider was gone, Aemon sat long in silence, the scroll still warm from his hands. He thought of the citadel's marble halls, the soft rustle of robes, the bells of Old Town echoing across the Honeywine. All that seemed another life, belonging to another man. He rose slowly and made his way to the rookery. Snow fell in thin, whispering veils through the open slits. The ravens shifted and croaked, their black eyes glinting in the half-light. "My brothers," he said softly, spreading grain upon the table. "Another Targaryen sits the throne. The wheel turns again." The largest raven, a dark-feathered creature that had perched beside him for years, gave a low, mournful cry. "Yes," Aemon murmured, stroking its neck. "It always ends the same way, with blood and fire." That night, as he walked the ramparts, he felt the wall's vastness press upon him like an ancient, sleeping beast. The wind howled between the merlons, sharp enough to cut breath. Below, the torches flickered along the yard, casting faint light upon the snow. He paused by the eastern watchtower, where a young recruit kept guard. The boy straightened at his approach.
Cold night, Maester." "All nights are cold here," Aemon said, "but this one feels heavier." The boy smiled awkwardly. "I heard the wind carries the voices of the old kings. Do you think it's true?" Aemon looked northward, where the land vanished beneath a sea of white. "Perhaps. The dead never truly leave us. They only change their faces." The boy shivered and turned back to his post. Aemon lingered a moment longer, gazing out toward the darkness beyond the wall. He thought of the ranger who had spoken of the dead walking, of the strange lights he had seen flickering years ago, and wondered whether the old stories were waking at last. In the weeks that followed, the air grew colder still. Even the crows ceased their cries. Frost crept along the walls like veins, and the breath of men hung heavy in the yard. One morning, as Aemon tended the fire in the infirmary, a horn sounded from the gate. He turned, his heart quickening in his frail chest. 3 blasts, the signal for danger beyond the wall. The watch stirred to life. Boots pounded on the stones, steel hissed from scabbards. Aemon made his way outside, leaning heavily upon his staff. Snow stung his face, the wind shrieking in his ears. A small party of rangers had returned, dragging behind them a sled wrapped in furs. They moved quickly, eyes darting as though afraid to look back. "What is it?" Aemon asked one of them. The ranger's face was pale with fear. "We found them near the Frostfangs. Whole villages gone. Burned, or worse. The dead don't stay dead, Maester." Aemon looked to the sled. Beneath the furs lay a shape too still to be sleeping. He felt a dread that no logic could dispel. "Bring him inside," he said, "and keep the fire burning." They obeyed, though unease rippled through them. The air seemed to thicken as they carried the body into the hall. Aemon drew close, pulling the furs aside. The man beneath was pale as snow, his eyes clouded blue. The brothers murmured prayers, but Aemon only stared, feeling the weight of centuries pressing upon him. "So it begins again," he whispered, "as it always must." Later that night, he sat alone in his chamber, quill in hand. He wrote by candlelight, the words slow but steady. "To the citadel, to any who still remember me. The dead walk in the cold lands beyond the wall. Fire is our only defense. Remember that when winter comes." He sealed the letter and tied it to the leg of his oldest raven. "Fly," he told it. "Fly faster than the snow." The bird vanished into the storm. Days passed, then weeks. The air grew brittle, the snow relentless. Men spoke of shapes moving beyond the wall, shadows that left no footprints, whispers that froze the tongue. The young grew restless, the old grew silent. Aemon felt his strength waning. His steps faltered more often now, his breath short. Yet his mind remained clear, and his purpose undimmed. He gathered the recruits by the hearth one evening and spoke softly. "You are the shields that guard the realms of men," he told them. "But the greatest battle is not against the cold or the dead. It is against despair. When you stand in darkness, remember why you took the oath." One boy raised his hand. "Why did you, Maester? You were born to kingship. Why choose the wall?" Aemon smiled faintly. "Because even a king's blood can freeze. And I learned long ago that peace is not found in crowns, but in duty freely chosen." They listened in silence, the firelight flickering across their faces. When they left, Aemon remained by the flames. He thought of his brothers long gone, of Lara's quiet courage, of Bloodraven's cryptic warnings, of his brother Aegon's hopeful dreams.
He thought, too, of the boy he had once been, standing beneath the stars of Old Town, believing knowledge could heal all wounds.
"Perhaps it can," he murmured, "but not the wounds of the heart."
Outside, the wind rose again, keening across the wall. The night was long, but Aemon Targaryen did not fear it. His watch was not yet ended. He closed his eyes, listening to the silence between gusts, a silence vast as the sea. Somewhere beyond the wall, something ancient stirred, and the old man knew the world was changing once more. But whatever storm would come, he was ready. He had already made his choice long ago, beneath the weight of a crown he never wore. And though his body trembled, his heart remained steady as the wall itself. The snows of that winter never melted. They piled higher each month, until even the black stones of Castle Black disappeared beneath their weight. The brothers labored with shovels and torches, but the drifts always returned by morning, as though the storm itself were alive. The world seemed to shrink, reduced to white walls, dark sky, and the thin glow of the watchfires that fought a losing battle against the cold. Maester Aemon felt the season in his bones. Each dawn came slower, each breath heavier. He had grown so thin that the wind seemed to move through him. Yet his eyes, though dimmed by age, still held their light. He read by the hearth, listened to the ravens, and taught the young brothers how to write their ledgers, though his fingers trembled around the quill. The men whispered that he would not see another spring, but Aemon smiled whenever he heard such talk. "I have lived through 100 winters," he said. "This one is only colder." Still, he knew the truth. The end was near. One morning, the horn sounded again, 3 blasts, long and mournful. From the top of the wall came shouts and the sound of boots running through the yard. Aemon stood by his window, clutching his cloak tight about his shoulders. Through the veil of snow, he saw torches gathering at the gate. Rangers had returned, half their number gone, their horses lathered and wild-eyed. They spoke in gasps of shadows moving in the storm, of eyes like blue fire, of corpses that did not burn. When they brought the bodies in, Aemon saw the truth of it himself. One of the dead was already stiff with frost, yet the eyes, those cold, terrible eyes, still glowed faintly with an inner light. "Keep them away from the fire," Aemon said quickly, "and guard the hall through the night. Burn the bodies only when the wind dies." The brothers obeyed without question. None of them wished to linger near the dead. That night, Aemon sat beside the fire, the flames crackling low. The faces of the fallen men haunted him. He had seen too much death in his life, yet none like this. It was as if the world itself had turned against the living. He took up his quill once more and began to write, though his hand shook with each stroke. "To the archmaesters of the citadel, and to any who will listen. The long night stirs again. The tales of old are not lies. The cold brings life where there should be none. Fire is our only defense. Remember the wisdom of Valyria, but fear its pride. Dragons may yet be the world's only hope." When he finished, he sealed the letter and sent it with a raven into the storm. The bird vanished at once, swallowed by snow. He wondered if it would ever reach Old Town, or whether the— "Keep your hearts warm," he told them, "for the cold will claim any man who lets despair inside." But he saw the fear in their faces.
The old songs of the watch had become prayers now, murmured over every meal. Even the ravens grew silent, huddling together in the rookery as if afraid of the storm outside. One evening, as Aemon sat alone by the fire, a shadow fell across the door. A young steward entered, John, a boy of 15 with hands raw from labor and eyes too old for his years.
"Maester,"
John said softly,
"the Lord Commander asks for you. He says the fire's gone out in the East Watchtower, and the men are afraid to go near."
Aemon rose slowly, his joints creaking like old wood.
"Show me."
Together they crossed the yard, their lanterns small against the vast dark. Snow hissed underfoot, and the wind tore at their cloaks. The tower loomed ahead, its windows black. Inside, the air was heavy and still. The hearth was cold, the ashes undisturbed. Aemon knelt beside them, brushing away soot with trembling fingers.
"No fire has burned here for days,"
he murmured. John frowned.
"But the men swore they lit it yesterday."
Aemon looked toward the stairs that spiraled upward into the dark.
"Fetch more torches," he said, "and summon the Lord Commander. This tower must be sealed until dawn."
When the boy returned with help, Aemon was still there, staring at the cold hearth. Something in the stones whispered of wrongness, of an emptiness too deep to name. That night, no one slept. The wind howled, rattling shutters and doors. In the distance, faint cries echoed from the forest, human and not. By morning, the storm had eased. The world lay blanketed in silence, a white so bright it hurt the eyes. Aemon watched from the ramparts as the sun struggled to pierce the clouds. It reminded him of his youth, of mornings in Old Town when the sky was golden and the world seemed wide with promise. He thought then of his brother Aegon and of the dragon's dream they had once shared, a dream of a world united, ruled with wisdom instead of fear. Aegon had tried to make that dream real, and in doing so had kindled another fire that consumed them all. Aemon's lips curved into a weary smile.
"So it ends as it began," he whispered. "Fire and ice, always the same song."
That night, he felt his strength falter. His hands shook so violently he could no longer hold the quill. The letters on the page blurred before his failing eyes. He called for John, who hurried to his side.
"Take this down,"
Aemon said, his voice faint but clear.
"I would leave my last words to those who come after."
John nodded and readied his pen. Aemon spoke slowly, between breaths.
Tell them I was never a king, though I might have been. Tell them I chose peace, though it cost me all I loved. Tell them the wall is not merely stone and ice. It is the line between the world that was and the world that must be.
He paused, his breath shallow.
And tell them a maester's duty is not to knowledge alone, but to mercy.
When he fell silent, John lowered the quill.
"Maester?"
Aemon smiled faintly.
"It is a cold night, boy. Let the fire burn bright."
He closed his eyes, the lines of his face softening. Outside, the wind fell still, and the snow drifted quietly against the window. John stayed beside him until the last ember died. When the brothers gathered at dawn, they found Maester Aemon seated by the cold hearth, his head bowed as if in thought. A faint smile touched his lips. They buried him beside the heart tree, beneath the red leaves that fluttered against the gray sky. The wind whispered through the branches, carrying his name northward into the endless white. Some said the storm broke that day. Others swore they saw a single raven rise from the wall and fly south, black against the morning sun.
And though no king claimed him, no hall bore his banner. The realm would one day remember Maester Aemon Targaryen, not for the crown he refused, but for the peace he kept in his heart, until the very end. His watch, at last, was over. The snows buried Aemon's grave, until even the stone that marked it vanished beneath the drifts. For a time, the brothers spoke his name in reverence, lighting a single candle each night in the rookery. Yet winter has a way of stealing all warmth, even memory, and as the years rolled on, his story became another ghost among the thousands that haunted the wall. But peace was never meant to last upon that frozen edge of the world. 3 winters passed before the winds changed again. The watch had grown lean, its numbers few. Ravens came rarely now, and those that did brought tidings of madness in the south, of a king gone wild with fire and whispers, and a realm trembling beneath the weight of prophecy. The name Targaryen still carried both glory and doom, and though Aemon was long dead, his blood yet flowed through the veins of the dragon kings who burned their own thrones for the sake of power. Jon, the boy who had served the old maester in his final days, had become a man by then, hard-eyed, steady-handed, a true brother of the Watch. He had taken Aemon's teachings as scripture, that peace was earned through service, that mercy was stronger than pride. Yet even he could not ignore the unease creeping through Castle Black. "The cold grows worse each year," said Lord Commander Corgyle one morning, staring northward from the top of the wall. "We'll need both soon enough." That night, the brothers rekindled the watchfires along the ramparts, their orange light flickering weakly against the vast dark. It was said that Aemon's spirit lingered near the heart tree, and some swore they heard his voice in the wind, a soft murmur urging them to hold fast. Yet whispers spread of strange shapes moving through the woods beyond the wall, of beasts that did not bleed and eyes that glowed like shards of ice. Men disappeared in the night, their cries swallowed by the storm. Then came the first raven. Its wings were rimed with frost when it struck the rookery window, and it carried no message, only the silence of the grave. Jon held it in his hands, feeling its lifeless weight. He thought of the letter Aemon had sent south so long ago, a warning the world had likely forgotten. He remembered the Maester's final words, "The wall is the line between the world that was and the world that must be." He looked out at the snow and whispered, "Then we will hold the line, old friend." The next weeks were a blur of wind and dread. Patrols vanished, fires sputtered and died. The sky remained gray and heavy, never breaking into clear light. One morning, as Jon stood atop the wall, he saw movement far out upon the ice. Figures, dozens of them, walking in eerie silence. They were too still, too straight, untouched by the wind. When he sounded the horn, the sound barely carried against the gale. By the time the others joined him, the shapes had disappeared into the white. But that night, they came. The gates shuddered under the weight of the storm. The wind howled like a living thing, carrying with it a chorus of voices that were not voices. Screams, sighs, the hiss of cold breath. "Light the torches!" Jon shouted. Men ran to obey. Flames sprang up along the yard, casting trembling circles of light. Within one of those circles, a figure appeared, pale, lifeless, its eyes burning blue. The dead ranger moved with a terrible grace, his sword raised. He fell upon the first man he met, cutting him down in silence. The others screamed, their fear rising above the wind. Jon seized a torch and swung it hard. Fire met frost. The creature shrieked as the flames consumed it, collapsing into ash. "Fire!" Jon cried. "Burn them! Burn them all!" The yard became chaos. Men fought and fell, steel useless against the cold. The night was filled with the crackle of flame and the thud of bodies. and above it all, the wind sang, a high, mournful wail that seemed to come from everywhere at once. By dawn, the gates still stood, though the ground was littered with the dead. Only a handful of brothers remained. Jon sat by the dying fire, his hands blackened with soot and blood. He looked toward the rookery. The ravens were gone. All but one cage stood empty, and within that cage perched a great black bird, watching him with knowing eyes.
"Maester Aemon,"
Jon whispered. The raven tilted its head.
"Burn,"
it croaked.
"burn."
Jon rose slowly.
"I will."
He took up his torch and made for the gate, where the bodies of the fallen lay in the snow. He piled them high and set them alight. The flames rose, bright and furious, devouring the darkness. For a moment, the wind ceased, and the light seemed to drive back the cold. But Jon knew it was only a reprieve. That night, as he sat alone in the Lord Commander's chamber, he opened the chest that held Aemon's old writings. There, among the parchments, he found a letter sealed with black wax. The words within were faded but legible. "If ever the dead should walk again, remember this. The wall is not built only of ice. It is built of will. As long as one man keeps faith, the darkness cannot claim the world." Jon closed his eyes, hearing Aemon's voice as clearly as if the old man stood beside him. "Then I will keep faith," he murmured. "For you,
For all of us."
He left the letter upon the table, beside the map of the realm, and returned to the ramparts. The sky above was a vast swirl of gray and white. Far to the north, faint lights flickered, green and silver and blue, like flames dancing upon water. The aurora had returned, painting the heavens with ghostly fire. Jon felt no fear, only a strange calm. The night was vast, and he was small. But that was as it should be. This was what Maester Aemon had chosen, a life given freely, a duty that outlived crowns and kings. As the wind rose, he thought he heard a whisper beneath it, a voice soft as snow. "The watch endures, so long as one heart endures." He smiled, lifting his eyes to the shifting lights. "Then we endure," he said. The wall loomed around him, ancient and unbroken. And in that moment, amid the ruin of men, beneath the weight of ages, the fire Aemon had kindled so long ago still burned, small but defiant, a spark against the endless night. And though the cold pressed close and the dead walked beyond the wall, the light did not go out. Not yet. Years passed, though the wall knew little of years. It counted only the rise and fall of storms, the coming and fading of winds, the breaths of men that steamed briefly into the cold before vanishing forever. The world beyond had changed. Kings burned, thrones shattered, dragons were born again. But Castle Black stood, quiet and stern, a sentinel above the ruins of time. Jon Snow grew old within its shadow. His hair, once black as a raven's wing, had turned to silver, and his shoulders bent beneath the weight of years and memory. Many of those who had fought beside him were long gone, their bones hidden beneath frost. Yet the boy who had once sat beside Maester Aemon still lived within him, a boy who had listened to wisdom spoken softly by a dying fire, who had learned that courage could be quiet, and that peace was the rarest kind of strength. It was said that on still nights, when the wind ceased its keening, a man could hear the voice of the old maester whispering from the rookery, urging the watch to hold fast. Whether ghost or memory, none could say, but the thought gave the brothers comfort when the cold seemed endless.
Jon often climbed to the top of the wall alone, his wolf's fur cloak snapping in the wind. From there, he would gaze northward to the endless white waste that stretched beyond sight. He had seen more than any man should: death and fire, prophecy and blood. And he knew the realm below still trembled under the same old chains. But here, atop the wall, the air was clean. Here, men were equal, bastards and princes, sinners and saints, all bound by the same vow. The nights were longest then. The aurora returned more often, painting the sky with ribbons of pale fire. Its glow seemed to pulse like the breath of some ancient god. Sometimes Jon thought he saw figures in that light, familiar faces lost to time. Samwell, laughing in the library, Ed's weary grin, Ghost pacing silently beside him. And sometimes, when the wind shifted, he could almost hear another voice, the calm, steady murmur of Aemon Targaryen, reminding him to keep his heart warm. One evening, as the sun sank into a horizon of steel and snow, Jon sat before the fire with parchment spread across the table. He had begun to write the histories of the Watch, for the younger brothers no longer remembered the days when the wall had nearly fallen. His hand was slow, but steady. "I served beside a Maester once," he wrote, "a man of dragon's blood who turned from the crown for the sake of the realm. He taught me that duty is not obedience, but choice, and that the truest kings are those who rule their own hearts." He paused, dipping his quill again. Outside, the wind sighed against the window. "When I was young, I believed honor alone could save the world. But I have learned that mercy must walk beside it, or both are lost."
The wall stands because of such mercy. It endures because men remember what they loved before they came here. The words blurred as his vision dimmed. He set down the quill and leaned back, weary but at peace. The fire popped, sending sparks dancing into the air. He thought again of Aemon, frail and blind, seated by a similar fire so many years ago. "Would you be proud, old man?" he murmured. The flames seemed to flicker in answer. That night, sleep came slowly. Dreams carried him back to the citadel, to sunlit courtyards and the sound of bells upon the wind. He saw Aemon again, younger and strong, his eyes bright with wisdom and laughter. The old Maester stood before a great door of ice, his chain glimmering like frost. "Come, Jon," said Aemon gently. "Your watch is done." Jon shook his head. "Not yet." Aemon smiled. "It was done the day you chose peace. Come and see what lies beyond." The door opened and light poured through, a light like dawn after endless night. Jon felt warmth touch his face, the first true warmth he had known in years. When he woke, the fire had burned low. The air in the chamber was still, and the dawn light crept pale and soft across the floor. He felt no pain, only a great stillness. He rose, though his limbs did not seem to move, and for a moment he saw himself lying upon the bed, eyes closed, a faint smile on his lips. Then he turned toward the open window, where the cold wind waited. Beyond it, the horizon shimmered with the faint glow of morning. He stepped through. At Castle Black, they found him at sunrise. The Lord Commander, newly appointed, scarcely older than Jon had been in his youth, stood beside the bed in silence. The parchment still lay upon the table, the ink frozen in its well. "Read it," said one of the stewards softly. The Lord Commander lifted the page, his breath misting in the chill. He read aloud the final words written in Jon Snow's careful hand.
"Let this be remembered. The wall was never held by stone or ice or steel, It was held by men who stood when all others fled. It was held by the living for the living. And when the long night returns, may there always be one man who remembers. They buried him beside Maester Aemon, under the heart tree's red leaves. The snow had melted briefly that year, and pale grass showed through the frost. A single black raven perched upon the branches, silent and watchful. The brothers stood in a circle, their heads bowed. None spoke until the youngest among them asked, "Will he see the dawn, Maester?" The new Maester, gray-bearded and solemn, replied, "He already has." That night, the aurora blazed across the sky brighter than any man had ever seen. It rippled above the wall like a crown of living fire, green and gold and crimson, its light spilling across the ice. The brothers watched in awe, the glow reflected in their eyes. One man swore he saw two figures standing upon the wall's highest edge, one cloaked in black, the other in robes of gray. They seemed to watch together in silence, side by side, as if guarding the realm even in death. By morning, the lights had faded, and the wall stood silent once more. But from that day on, the brothers swore the nights grew a little warmer, the wind a little less cruel. And in the rookery, among the ravens that still came and went, there was one bird with feathers touched by silver. It perched near the fire each evening, croaking softly, as though repeating words long lost. "Peace," it would say. "Peace." The watch endured, as it always had. And though snow would fall again, and darkness would one day rise, the memory of two men, one who turned from a crown and one who held the line, burned bright within the hearts of all who stood the wall. For the world would always need its watchmen, and the fire of the living would never truly die. The wind had changed.
Where once it moaned endlessly against the wall, now it moved softly through the trees of the haunted forest, like breath drawn by something that lived once more. The snows began to recede, and the ravens returned to their towers, black wings bright against the pale sky. The long winter was ending at last. From the high battlements of Castle Black, the new generation of the Watch looked out over a world transformed. There were no longer shadows moving in the frost, nor blue fires flickering beyond the line of sight. The dead had gone to their rest. Yet the men who stood upon the wall felt their absence keenly, for it was the memory of that terror that bound them now, not fear, but understanding. They had endured, and in their endurance found purpose. The Lord Commander was a man called Edric Hill, son of no house, bastard of the Reach. He wore his cloak of black wool with quiet dignity, his eyes clear and kind. On the first morning of true spring, he climbed to the rookery with the maester and the steward to make an offering at the resting place of those who had come before. The grave of Maester Aemon lay beneath the heart tree still, though the snow no longer veiled it. Beneath the same tree, beside him, rested Lord Snow. Their markers were simple, smooth stones carved with only names and the sigil of the Watch. Yet to those who stood before them, those names carried a weight greater than crowns. Edric knelt and laid his hand upon the stone. "The wall still stands," he said softly. "The Watch endures. And though the world below burns and changes, we will remember." The maester, an old woman from White Harbor with sharp eyes and a voice like wind in reeds, nodded. "It is said that the ghosts of these two watch over us still." Edric smiled faintly. "Then let them hear our promise." He rose and turned to his men, who had gathered silently behind him. "Brothers," he said, his voice carrying in the clear air, "today we honor the past." Maester Aemon turned from a crown to serve,
and Lord Snow gave his life to keep the world from darkness. The wall stands because of them. The fire of men burns because of their choice. Let their names remind us that our duty is not to glory, nor to war, but to the living. The brothers bowed their heads, each touching the pommel of his sword in silent salute. The Maester scattered a handful of black seeds at the base of the heart tree. They vanished quickly into the softening earth, carried away by the first green shoots of spring.
"From the cold, life," she whispered.
That night, the brothers gathered in the common hall. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and roasting meat. Laughter rang from the benches, and mugs of ale passed from hand to hand. For the first time in memory, there was joy within those stone walls. When the fire burned low, the Maester called for silence.
"It was the custom of Maester Aemon," she said, "to end each winter with a tale, to remind his brothers why they kept their vigil. Let it be so again."
Edric nodded.
"Then tell us one, Maester. Tell us a story for the night."
She smiled, her eyes glinting in the firelight.
"I will tell you the tale of the dragon who slept," she said, "and of the crown he never wore." The hall grew quiet. Even the wind seemed to still outside. "Long ago," the Maester began, "when the realm was torn by fire and blood, there lived a prince who was wise and gentle. He was born of dragons, his blood hot with flame, yet his heart longed for peace. When his father died, the lords of the realm called for him to take the Iron Throne, for none doubted his right. But the prince saw what the crown demanded, the lies, the blood, the sorrow, and he turned from it. He went instead to the citadel, where he learned the healing arts. And when the realm called him again, he fled to the wall to serve in darkness rather than rule in light. There he found the peace that kings never know."
Many years later, the world nearly ended. The dead rose, the sky burned, and the wall was the last defense between men and the night. Yet the prince, now an old maester, taught his brothers courage. He showed them that fire, when guided by wisdom, could banish even the coldest shadow. And when he died, another rose in his stead, a bastard boy who had once been his pupil. That boy carried the maester's teachings into battle and gave his life that the living might endure. Their names are gone from the mouths of men, as all names must go. But their deeds remain, as all true deeds do. And so long as the watch stands, the dragon's peace and the bastard's faith will not be forgotten. The fire crackled softly when she finished. No one spoke for a long while. Then one of the younger brothers lifted his cup. "To Maester Aemon," he said. Another raised his own. "And to Lord Snow." The hall filled with murmurs of assent, and soon every cup was lifted high. "To Aemon and Snow," they said together, their voices echoing through the rafters. "The Watchers who never fell." When the hall grew quiet again, the wind began to move outside. It whispered through the cracks in the wall, curling around the towers and battlements. A young recruit keeping watch upon the rampart shivered as the breeze brushed his cheek. He turned, thinking he heard voices behind him, but saw only the stars wheeling above the dark. Still, he could not shake the sense that he was not alone. He looked northward, toward the ghostly line where the world ended, and thought he saw two figures walking along the crest of the wall, one tall and broad-shouldered, wrapped in a black cloak, the other bent but radiant, his silver hair gleaming like moonlight on ice. They moved side by side, speaking softly, though the wind carried no sound of their words. The boy blinked, and they were gone.
He stood a long time in silence before whispering, "The watch endures." And the wind, passing through the stones, seemed to answer, "Always." Spring spread slowly southward, melting the rivers, waking the woods. Ravens flew again to Old Town, bearing tidings that the snows were breaking even in the north. At the citadel, a novice studying the histories found a single parchment, yellowed and cracked with age. It bore no title, only the words in a careful, faded hand. "Let it be known that a man once turned from a crown, so that others might live free of its weight. His name was Aemon of House Targaryen, called Maester of the Night's Watch. He chose service over rule, wisdom over glory, peace over fire. And in that choice, the realm was saved." The novice brought it to his archmaester, who read it aloud, then smiled faintly. "Copy it," he said. "Such truths should not be lost." And so it was copied, and copied again, until the tale of the dragon who slept became legend, no longer of thrones and crowns, but of mercy, duty, and the quiet strength of those who hold the dark at bay. At the edge of the world, the wall still stood. The snow glittered like crushed glass beneath the pale sun. And if one listened closely, beneath the sighing wind and the creak of ice, one might hear two voices still, the Maester and the Lord, bound forever to the watch they had chosen. "Peace," murmured one, soft as falling snow. "Endure," answered the other, steady as stone. And high above, the light of dawn touched the wall once more, blazing gold upon the ice, proof that even in a world born of fire and shadow, there could still be morning.